Just what's on your mind, what you drinking? Is that whiskey on your
LA, what is up? What is up? Welcome back to the Showtime Forum Podcast. Once again, I am Rey Goldenknight, and along with me is Goldenknight GFX. With us today, we have none other than one of the co-hosts of one of the best podcasts out there right now, especially if you're an NBA fan. We got none other than Harrison Sanford of the Inside the Green Room podcast, which he hosts alongside new Laker guard and two-time NBA champ Danny Green. What's going on, Harrison?
Nothing much, man. Just spending some time here in Toronto before we all wrap it up. I think I might be doing some house sitting soon because I believe Danny's he's in Vegas right now, and I think he's doing some media in LA. But other than that, just hanging out. I'm already excited for the next season.
Oh, man, I bet you are. It's going to be a big transition, going from Toronto to LA, right?
Yeah, it should be a big transition. Going to stay up a lot later, even though I usually stay up late watching basketball anyway. The weather will be a bit nicer. And one would assume that our podcast guests will be a bit more expanded now.
Oh, yeah.
Being in LA. So I'm
That's
looking forward
happens,
to it.
Yeah, you're going to have Al Pacino and Andres Garcia. You're going to have Jack Nicholson. So you better watch it.
Yeah, and Snoop Dogg's actually in town in Toronto this weekend, so I'm gonna try and talk to him and let him know what the deal is.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
Yeah, man. Tell Snoop I got a bone to pick with him, man. He was sitting there telling me Kawhi was on the way, and here we are, right? Here we are.
Kawhi. Why don't you come with the Lakers? That was funny. That little thing he did.
Oh yeah, that was great.
That was hilarious.
So I know we were talking a little bit before we got going. You were mentioning the fact that you had a couple runs in different cities, and it seems to be like everywhere you touch, you got that Midas touch. So everything seems kind of turn to gold, right? I think you said you were in Cleveland for that finals run, obviously in Toronto. I think you were telling me something about Georgia as well, right?
Yeah, my first job as a sports anchor for a TV station, it was in Southern Georgia, and we also covered Florida State football because it's in Tallahassee because of the way the market and the TV strength was a signal either yet. So I covered Florida State. That's the year they won the national championship with Jameis Winston. That was my first year there. First year when I was a sports anchor at Ohio. Ohio State won a national championship, and the Cavs won the NBA Finals a year later, or 2 years later. And then now I come to Toronto, first year of the podcast. Next thing you know, I'm on a parade float. So I've been spoiled, man. I've been spoiled, and so I'm looking forward to hopefully bringing that to the West Coast.
Oh man, I hope you bring it too, bro. Because it sounds like we were chasing the wrong guy this whole time. It sounds like we shouldn't have been chasing Kawhi at all. We should have been chasing you.
You know what time it is.
So obviously you host this podcast, Inside the Green Room with Danny. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how'd you guys get going? When can we expect that? How often do you guys record?
Yeah, so this past year at least we recorded 2 to 3 times a month. Depending on how the structure was, depending on what his schedule was. And we basically started it, I just kind of detailed there. I've been a sports anchor across the States for a while, and I know Danny wants to get into broadcasting when he's done playing, or at least give it a strong consideration.
Yeah.
And the cool thing for me as somebody who's been in the industry for a while is to see Danny get better at being a broadcaster and telling stories and asking the right questions. So I'm getting excited because he's really getting a lot better at that. And when it comes to Danny and I's relationship, I've known him for over 15 years. Him and I both from Long Island, New York. And I actually wasn't as good as a basketball player as he was. Shocker. And so I actually, at 16 years old, I started writing articles about the best high school basketball players in New York. And obviously with Danny being one of them, we kind of built a relationship from there. So I've admired him from afar. He's admired me from afar, I think. And then we joined forces about 3 days right before the Raptors trade. So
wow.
The timing has been more than perfect.
Yeah,
So-
what I wanted to ask about that is, this is like the most interesting way I've ever seen a free agent choose their destination. How did you guys choose what you were going to do, how you were going to update fans? To me, it was a little bit fun to watch. I had both of your guys' notifications on deck because there seems like there was an update with every single report that was coming out. How did you guys, think of that idea?
Well, what the podcast aims to do is that we want to take you inside the life of what it is to be Danny Green. And now, obviously, it might be more fun to be inside the life of LeBron James or Kevin Durant, but I think Danny is a little bit more humanized because he's just, for the most part, a role player. And
right.
For the most, it's a little bit easier for the common person to maybe even connect with him and the things that he does, whether it's just walking his dogs down the street or having an issue with, somebody's whatever he might be doing, parking his car or getting animals across the border, all types of wild things that happen in his life.
Did you say getting animals across the border?
Yeah. There was a big issue when he was trying to get to Canada. Oh man. But for the most part, we just try to be as transparent as possible, that we, as much as we can be, without upsetting any teams or agents or things of that nature. This is what it is to be a 32-year-old veteran in the league, but still trying to assert yourself and still trying to continue your career. And, I'm sure there's somebody who can kind of relate to that. Somebody whose career is kind of maybe on hold. There's young guns coming in. You still want to hold your stay in the league, and you're surrounded by talented players who try to take your spot. So as much as we can, we try to be as transparent as possible with what it is to be with or be friends with Danny Green. That's the goal of the podcast. Basically, we allow everybody to be somewhat friends, or at least get to know them a bit better. And hopefully we've achieved that so far.
So obviously, you've been in the business for a while, so I'm sure it takes a lot for you to get starstruck. But obviously, coming to LA, like you were touching, you're going to have some pretty interesting guests on, most likely. Who would you say is going to be the most? Who's gonna hit you with that awe? Once you get them on the podcast. Like, I mean, you're gonna have you'll have Snoop, Ice Cube. You got plenty of guys to choose from right now, right?
The funny thing is, I'm not saying this in an arrogant way. I don't think there's going to be anybody.
I
mean, when I was 16 years old, I covered the NBA draft, and that was the draft with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony.
Woo.
So I don't think I will be. There's one person in the business that I really admire. That's Ernie Johnson. And I've gotten to meet him already.
All right.
So that's been pretty cool. Unless you tell me maybe Michael Jordan's coming on the pod.
Yeah, I could see that one. That one.
But honestly, for me, I will be more in awe when the interview's over and I get to see how the guys, whoever we might interview, is as a real person. And maybe when I go back to wherever I'm living and I think, wow, that guy was a lot more cool than I thought, a lot more chill, a lot more funny than I thought. Maybe maybe I'll be in awe in the aftermath. Than up front.
Okay, I got you. We got everything that went down this past weekend with free agency. We had a lot of guys going different places. Obviously, Danny was one of the later chips to fall in the whole thing. But I know, obviously, you weren't making the decisions yourself. But what dog did you have in the fight?
For me, there were two scenarios that were going to be very good. Whether it was staying with the Raptors, because I kind of have built up somewhat of a following here, and I truly love the city of Toronto. But at the same time, I know that what's good for Danny is what's good for the podcast and what's good for me. So I also knew that the Lakers might even be a better choice for him than the Raptors. Maybe if Kawhi came back and Danny came back, they win a title. But from a usage standpoint, Danny is a lot more valuable to the Lakers than he would have been for the Raptors next year, simply because of the shooting that LeBron James and Anthony Davis are going to need to excel. And, a lot of times with the Raptors, Danny was pretty much, he was more of an option, not really a threat, if that makes any sense, where he was standing in the corner, but he wouldn't really get any plays run for him. Not too many actions were run for him. He was a product of ball movement. Whereas I've seen LeBron play with Kyle Korver. I've seen LeBron play with J.R. Smith. And I see what LeBron's done with Mike Miller. Yeah. He's going to put Danny in a lot of actions that are going to make Danny even more valuable than he was for the Raptors with the Lakers, I believe, or at least I hope. And that will enhance Danny's productivity and potentially, make him an NBA champion one more time, at least.
Yeah, well, obviously we got to...
That to me made a lot of sense just because, all right, first and foremost, when Danny Green's trying to choose a team, more than, and I heard the pod when he said more than waiting on Kawhi, he's just waiting to see what other teams have lined up because the Mavericks did have a larger offer or that they wanted to give him as far as more years. And that's something that he had to kind of take into consideration, whether it's more of a kind of rebuild situation or going to win now mode with the Lakers. So as soon as Kawhi went with the Clippers, the next thing I was saying is we need to get Danny Green. Once I saw the news that broke on Twitter, man, that made me really happy. He's going to be excellent next to LeBron and Anthony Davis.
Yeah, I think he's really gonna thrive. As it pertains to that Mavericks offer, it's my understanding that third year was only partially guaranteed. And if you kind of look at Danny's a great locker room guy, so maybe they still would have given him that third year. But if you look at the timeline between Luka and Porzingis, does it make sense at that point to have a 34-year-old shooting guard at that point on the roster, or do you let his money fall off the books and go to tax somebody who's really ready to potentially get to the Western Conference Finals with Luka and KP having gotten 2 years of being with each other? So it was a risky proposition. You take the 2 years with the Lakers. Hey, you might not come back to the Lakers after those 2 years, but you might have won 2 titles before you get to that point. Right?
Yeah. But there's going to be another team that's going to kind of be vying for that same championship across the hall, and that's going to be the Los Angeles Clippers. Obviously, Kawhi was wrapped up with the Lakers, the Clippers, Toronto, all that. Everybody, I think, is pretty familiar with the story at this point. But who would you guys say was the biggest winner in this offseason between the Lakers and the Clippers?
I'd have to say the Clippers, right? Because they got the best player on the market. They were able to keep him away from a competing team in the same arena. They kept everybody under wraps. They got Paul George on top of it.
Yeah.
And they really gained some cachet. I think it has to be them. Yeah, maybe Brooklyn would have had a chance if KD was healthy for this upcoming season. But for the most part, I'd have to say the Clippers, because if the Clippers don't get Kawhi and the Lakers get him, or the Raptors get him, the Clippers are out the mix for a world title. LeBron, whether Kawhi came or not, LeBron and AD were going to be the mix for a world title regardless.
Yeah.
So I would have to say the Clippers.
Yeah, and honestly, it's hard for me to even consider Anthony Davis like an off-season move, just because we've been linked to him for so long. I know Greg was talking about today, saying something about it's going to be official on Saturday, right? But I feel like we've been talking about this for like the past 3 years.
Yeah, I'm going to have to side with, as far as free agency goes, the Clippers, just because, again, they did get one of the best players in the world, if not the best right now. And then the Lakers, as far as that trade that went down for Anthony Davis, that's something that's, we already, like you said, have been touching on this for quite a while, so we knew kind of what to expect. But at the same time, plan B for the Lakers, to me, is just a total win. Because if you look at the players that we missed out on, a lot of those players did get overpaid or went to a situation where it doesn't necessarily benefit their play, and it benefits their pockets more. So as far as what the Lakers did, getting, Danny Green, Boogie Cousins, bringing in other solid players around the core that we're going to have now, Jared Dudley, another great locker room presence, and players of that nature is just, I think it's going to come all good together. And I think for the deals that we got these guys in, I think it's going to benefit the team a lot more than we think.
I think there's one player out there, or that was out there, that I thought would have been a really good fit for the Lakers, and unfortunately, out of nowhere, he retired. I thought Darren Collison would have been a great addition for this roster because of his defensive ability, because of his ability to work off the ball as a ball handler, so LeBron could still be the primary ball handler. I thought he would have been a great addition, but everybody got caught off guard when he decided to retire.
Yeah, but
Mirotic too. Mirotic that decided to go to Spain, and that's another thing that just kind of took us off guard. Those were two guys that were going to be in the market, and they were going to get pretty good amount of money. And then one retired, and one went, to Europe. So that was surprising as well.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, we got a few guys that are still left on the market. Out of the guys still remaining, who would you guys say is probably the guy that the Lakers would have to add right now just to kind of complete the puzzle?
I would think it'd be Andre Iguodala if the Grizzlies would just let him go. Simply because I think you have Danny or Avery Bradley, who are very adept at guarding point guards or smaller wings, but I don't think they have a premier, and I don't necessarily think Andre Iguodala is a premier wing defender, but I think he would serve a lot better as a wing defender than who the Lakers have on the roster right now. There's no answer right now for the combination of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And maybe LeBron takes one of them, but Danny Green's going to have to guard Paul George. Like, that's a tall order to ask. Paul George, legit 6'8", or maybe even 6'9". It's a tough order to ask them. So I would say Andre Iguodala would be the ideal person on the market. It's just a matter if he's going to be made available at some point.
Yeah, and then obviously the Clippers have been rumored too to maybe go ahead and snatch him up, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. That sounds like a Jerry West move, like the whole way through. I know you did touch on the fact that it's going to be tough to kind of match up with Kawhi and PG, but at the same rate, I know you touched on this a little bit on your podcast too. At the same rate, who's going to guard Boogie, AD, and LeBron when you line them up in the front court though? Because that's a beefy front. That's a beefy lineup.
Nobody.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah. You're asking what? Zubac and maybe Montrezl Harrell to stack up against AD and Boogie.
Yeah. There's no answer. I don't think there's any answer for it on the Clippers roster right now. Maybe they make a couple moves, but I guess the hope is that Boogie can look somewhat like he did with the Pelicans when him and AD and Rondo looked scary. I thought at one point that Warriors team that was out there with KD, I thought the Pelicans were the only team that can give them a run because they played such a different style than what the Warriors were presenting. I would say nobody can guard that combination if the shooting around it is right, and if Boogie can be somewhat of himself. He doesn't have to be his max potential, but I think if he's somewhat of himself, that's scary. And again, defense be damned. I know Boogie's going to be targeted in the pick and roll, but they are going to win the possession battle. And if you guys watch that Sixers-Raptors series, it was very hard for the Raptors to win because the size that the Sixers put on the court. And if it wasn't for a bounce kid, Sixers could have very well been in the Eastern Conference Finals, could have been a champion. So size does still play a factor if you could use it correctly.
Yeah. One of the things about Boogie Cousins that I said on Twitter as well is he's going to have this time around a whole summer to get in basketball shape, whereas last year he couldn't play until mid-January. So that summer is going to do him wonders, not only for his body, but also his play, getting ready mentally. Everything's going to help out. We've already seen he can do well with Anthony Davis. And just as, you touched on right now, that Pelicans team was scary. They swept the Blazers, and that was without Cousins. That was just Anthony Davis running through. Obviously, the Warriors proved to be a little bit too much. But if Cousins can play to form with Anthony Davis, and you have JaVale McGee coming off the bench, that's a lot of size there that I don't think the Clippers or any team really in the league can compete against.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm glad you're coming around on Boogie, Javi. I'm glad you're coming around on Boogie. I know not a lot of you guys were sitting there saying that you didn't want to take a risk on him, but
no. I was always saying
just
that
you.
Boogie,
it wasn't just you.
I was always saying Boogie for the right price, yes. Dwight Howard, absolutely no.
Oh no. We're talking about like back in February. We're not talking about last week.
No, yeah, it's hard to determine once he's coming off Achilles injury, but I saw flashes of what can help in the finals. I mean, and in the playoffs in general. I mean, I know he was injured there for a few stretches, but there were some games where you could see the impact was there. And again, with a whole summer to get healthy, I think he's going to bring it, and I think it's going to be a really, really important piece of the core here.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about Andre Iguodala, obviously, but let's say Memphis doesn't loosen their grips on him and they don't let him walk just like that. I think another interesting name that's been thrown out there is obviously Kyle Korver, but even more than Korver, I would even bring it maybe Thabo Sefolosha. Sefolosha obviously is no Iguodala, and he's not a shooter like Korver, but it's kind of like you balance. Obviously, Korver's going to come in there, he's going to run guys ragged around screens, and he's going to pop in as many threes as he can. But you kind of counter that with maybe Sefolosha, who's more of a typical 3-and-D guy. He's going to be a better perimeter defender, and he's coming off a few injuries and a couple down years, but I think he might be a steal as well.
I would agree with that addition. I guess I would provoke some thought here and just thinking about if you bring in Sefolosha, that's another guy that's expecting to get playing time. So you wonder, how many guys on this roster expect to get burned, and they're not going to end up getting burned. And the last thing you want in a year where they have to get it now because LeBron's only getting older, you want the chemistry to be right. So if Iguodala comes in, I think he owns enough respect across the league because he's a champion, because he's a good locker room guy. And I'm not saying that Thabo Sefolosha is not a good locker room guy, but Iguodala has a certain level of cachet because of his titles, because of the championship experience that he brings. I wonder if it just makes sense if you don't get Iguodala, hey, what we got is what we got. We trust you guys and empower the team. to be the best versions of themselves. I mean, it could again. I think Thabo might work, but it might have a counteractive effect if it's not somebody with the cachet of Iguodala. Maybe.
I agree with you on that. Another guy who had been taking a lot of heat this past, I wouldn't even say offseason, but the past year is Rob Pelinka. Rob Pelinka obviously went into this offseason as the solo GM for the first time. There's been rumors and there was talk this entire season about who the issue was. Was it him? Was it Magic? Was it both? You know, is he a scumbag? Is he a backstabber? Whatever the case was, right? So obviously now we've kind of seen what he's done. Well, not what he's done, but up until this point, what he's been able to accomplish it through free agency. Would you guys kind of say that he's what kind of grade would you give him? I guess is the question I'm asking.
I think you give him a solid B. I mean, it wasn't Kawhi Leonard, but maybe this is the perception that maybe the Lakers got fooled by Kawhi Leonard, but so did everybody.
Yeah.
So you can't really knock him. He didn't do any worse than anybody else did, and to still get Anthony Davis and to have he built a roster that can win a title. I would say right after the Clippers or the Lakers and the Clippers are 1A and 1B because of the moves that he made. So it's hard, and trust me, as somebody coming in from the outside looking at the Lakers, there's so much noise when it comes to
That's true.
I don't know. It's hard. I imagine it makes it harder to succeed because of all the noise. But when you sit back and you look at the roster, not just the talent, but the age and the maturity level of a lot of these players and players who are hungry to get their first title, DeMarcus Cousins, who damn near came back to the Warriors when he should have come back just so he could win a title. Anthony Davis, Avery Bradley, Jared Dudley. These guys are going to be hungry, and they just know that the window is so short for them. They got to do it now. I'd have to give them a B. I think it's solid, not great. Great would have been Kawhi, but again, Kawhi fooled everybody.
Yeah, same here. I mean, you got to give a B plus. Obviously, Kawhi would be the A in any single way there. But I mean, just like I said, considering what you lost out on and having a plan B that was already strong and in place is something that was just really good for Rob Pelinka. We didn't go ahead and panic and start handing out, a contract here, contract there that's way overpaid. We pick and choose the players that we wanted. Somebody, some players who are gritty, good defensively, can hit the three. And, that's the kind of culture that we are building. And we do have that shorter window just because of LeBron's age. Maybe in a couple of years that can change. But as of right now, for the next 2 years, I think we're ready to go. And we're a championship contention team.
For Pelinka, I mean, I think I've given Pelinka a little bit more slack than most have throughout the season. But I probably would have to say he's probably in the C range, C plus C range, just because I don't think anything he did was really extraordinary. I mean, I'm not saying there were bad moves. There was obviously a couple guys that you could argue were maybe a little overpaid. You might have overpaid a little bit. KCP comes to mind. But all in all, I don't think it was a terrible move. But I do think I wouldn't really put too much on it. Maybe Danny Green obviously was probably the best acquisition that I saw that just kind of fit, but it made so much sense, and I just can't see how that wouldn't have lined up for any other GM as well.
And one other thing too, two things. One, him being able to hold on to Danny Green and Danny risking at 32 years old, getting a player to hold on to that. I trust me. Danny called me a couple nights. I'm thinking, oh, he's gonna tell me it's over. I can't wait anymore. So he was able to let Danny hold on and not take that Mavericks deal. So that's one. But also number two, as you refer to KCP, I don't know if Rob Pelinka or even anybody anticipated Avery Bradley being available on the market. Yeah. So if Avery Bradley comes available a lot earlier in this whole process, maybe they don't re-sign KCP and maybe they try and go for somebody else with a bit more size as a wing defender, or maybe another ball handler. I'm not sure which way they would go, but the Avery Bradley thing kind of threw a wrench in the system. Thankfully, they picked him up, and that's a good thing to have. But I guess we don't know what happens if Avery Bradley doesn't come on the market so late.
Yeah, and I love that pickup of Avery Bradley. As soon as he got shipped off to Memphis, I was sitting here praying that this guy was going to get bought out. And I know a lot of people are down because he hasn't had the best last couple of seasons, but he's been hurt and all that, and obviously that plays a part. It's real easy as fans to kind of just dismiss that kind of stuff. But I mean, if anybody's ever been hurt, you ever had a hammy or anything like that, just as a regular average Joe, I mean, that's something tough to come back. And I can't even imagine to be an athlete who's, obviously you're supposed to perform at a high level. I can't even imagine having to recuperate from that, having that in the back of your mind, still having to perform and knowing that your entire livelihood's kind of depends on this.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I wanted to touch on that as well is, I mean, as far as Avery Bradley, and this goes for a lot of guys on the roster, they've been in teams where they've had to do a little bit more than they should or than they're expected to. Now in this team, when they come in, they can focus on their job. They don't have to do too much. They don't have to go out of their comfort zone. For example, Avery Bradley can hit the three. He can be a solid defender when he has a good line of defense as well. That's something that's going to motivate him. And granted, it was a short stint with Memphis. I mean, still 16 points per game is good for second best in his career. So, he left on a good note there as well. So that's something I'm expecting for a lot of these players to fit in based on the roles they can play now, as opposed to being expected to do too much before.
And, and I look back at the Raptors season, Kyle Lowry had one of his best seasons because he wasn't asked to do as much as he did with him and just DeMar DeRozan. Some games he would have 20 points. The next game he'd only have 12, but he'd still have his 8-9 assists. He'd still have his 4 or 5 rebounds. And when players are properly positioned or properly put into their role, you could really see them maximize their value. And I think as long as the roles get defined with the whole coach, Frank Vogel and Jason Kidd and Lionel Hollins, as long as they can define the roles relatively soon and the players fight for their positioning, I think they have a great chance to maximize their potential as an entire roster.
And while we have you on, man, you got that inside scoop on what number Danny Green's going to be wearing?
I believe it's 14, right?
Sticking to 14?
Yeah, Brandon Ingram is gone. 14 is his number. It dates back to back in his hometown of Long Island, in North Babylon, Long Island, when you were the best player on the basketball team or the football team. It was kind of like an honor to wear number 14 because it was one of the more popular players in the area had passed away. So in his honor, like the captain of the football or basketball team wore number 14 to represent not just him, but the neighborhood. And he's kept 14 ever since, outside of the year when he almost won Finals MVP because Gary Neal had 14.
I remember
Gary Neal.
Man, those guys with the Spurs were, 1-2 punch, Gary Neal and Danny Green. Man, that was intense.
Let them fly, man. Let them fly.
And obviously you said you kind of, you grew up, well, not kind of, but you grew up in New York, right? So I'm assuming you're a Knicks fan? Yes, no?
So listen. Trust me, I was a diehard Knicks fan. I grew up a Knicks fan. That Knicks tape era when Carmelo was like a top 3 MVP player, I watched every game intently, even when I was living in Texas at the time. But as I've gotten more and more of a journalist, I've kind of let loose of my fandom, and the KP trade kind of set me off. Like, I don't need to do it no more. Don't need to stress. I'm straight. I'm good. I could just enjoy the game. No screaming, no yelling. Just head. That was a good play. That was a great play. Like that move. Hate that move. And I could be stress-free.
Yeah.
Like, too much. I hope they do well eventually, but I'm not going to be the guy who said I left the bandwagon and jump back on. I'm off. I'm good. I'm happy. My homie won a title. I'm straight. I just want to be entertained at this point.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up too much like Stephen A. Smith right now does.
No need for all that. I'm good.
Oh man, but see, obviously sitting in New York and watching the Lakers from afar, like you mentioned earlier. I mean, what is that? What's that perception you get from an outside city? I mean, I've been in LA as long as I can remember, so obviously we got that bias and we see it in a different perspectives as somebody in New York, especially in New York.
You asked me my perception of LA or asked me my perception of the Lakers?
The Lakers.
Okay. I would say the Lakers are, my perception that's been taught to me at least, would be the Hollywood franchise, Yeah. It's glitz and glamour. It's everybody wants to see, and sometimes there's people there who don't even want to be there. They're just there for clout. But all the stars want to be associated with the Lakers, and all the good players want to be eventually associated with the Lakers because of what they've done, but also the perception is that it's a madhouse from the outside because of all the coverage that the team gets and all the personalities that are associated with the team, whether present or former. So that's the perception that I get from the outside. I'm curious to see what it is when I actually touch down. My perception of the Raptors over time changed as well as a franchise. As I got to know more the people who in the front office and the coaches and things of that nature. So a lot of what's portrayed is what the media's job is to do. They do a damn good job, but I'll see more when I touch down on the West Coast.
So, and how long do you think it'll be before you actually touch down in LA and get set up?
I want to get there a little bit before training camp. See the lay of the land. The funny thing is, I've actually never been to LA. I've been to Anaheim, but I actually have family in LA, so I'm going to spend some time there, get familiar, find some spots that I like, and I have a whole bunch of friends and family that been asking me to come out there. So I guess I'm on my way. I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm also going to enjoy I've always stayed up to about 4 a.m. watching basketball. Because I'm always, for the most part, I've been on the East Coast. So game finishes at 1 o'clock. Got to watch the Sports Center or the recap of it after. Next thing you know, it's 2:30, 3 o'clock. It's going to be very interesting to start watching games at what? You guys watch games at 4 p.m.?
Nah, mostly 7. It's usually going to be at 7 p.m.
So, yeah, the Lakers at 7 p.m., but the East Coast games, at 4 p.m., 5 p.m., oof, it's a breeze.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
You still got time to go dip your feet in the water, lay on the sand.
One of the most frustrating things, I'd leave, let's say I would leave an Eastern Conference Finals game, or I'd leave an Eastern Conference semifinals game, and locker room is over, media availability is over. By the time you get back home, it's already second half of the West Coast game. So now, in this situation, I could watch the end of the East Coast game, and by the time the Laker game or whatever game's going on at Staples Center is over, it's nothing left. Not missing anything anymore.
After that, you could just go to Malibu and then set in for a nice little dinner, You
guys got to speak, man. You don't even know.
Yeah, I don't even know, to be honest with you. But we want to thank you for coming on, Harrison. We appreciate it, man, especially so last minute. Obviously, you're welcome back whenever you'd like. Can't wait to hear the next episode of the Inside the Green Room. Why don't you tell people where they can follow you?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's Inside Green Room for the podcast account. I'm at High Def Sanford, HIDEF, kind of like high definition, Sanford, SANFORD. Twitter, it's a little bit more normal, Harrison Sanford. And our Twitter account is Green Room Inside. And as a Laker fan, I'm assuming that's listening, I don't have to tell you what Danny Green's social accounts are. You should.
Yeah, if you don't know what they are, then you should just be banned from Laker Nation.
There you go.
Hey, man, no, really, we appreciate you coming on. Big welcome from all Laker Nation from Los Angeles. We're looking forward to spreading that podcast all over the place and just seeing what's more to come, man. Good things to come here in LA.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think we've got a lot more stories to tell, and I think for Danny, it's going to be a nice way for him to connect with the fans. I think we did a real good job with that here in Toronto. His first year, I think the fans loved him because he gave them the inside view, and that's the same thing that we're going to do with the Lakers.
Yeah, I got one more question for you.
Sure.
Are you still able to wear shoes when you're walking around Danny Green's place, or you got to take them off?
Oh, man, listen. You can't take one step past the garage with your shoes. You're in trouble. You find out some of these NBA players, man, they really got they're real particular about things. When it comes to Danny, it's like cleanliness. His OCD is extreme. But that translates to like professionalism on the court, and when it comes to going to practice and being organized, it is what it is. Is it annoying for me? Yes, but it is what it is, man. You gotta do what you gotta do to make it succeed.
Fair enough.
Real quick before we get off here, got any crazy story post championship? Any crazy fans? Just anything outlandish? I know Canadians are a little low key a lot of the time, but
after the championship, there was one episode. We were also celebrating Danny's birthday.
Okay.
They had a little party for him, and Danny doesn't really drink, so he gave me like a bottle of Ace of Spades. Mm-hmm. And I'm good. I'm straight already at that point. I've enjoyed myself. Mm-hmm. And because the fans were so excited, it got to the point where I was pouring bottles of like expensive liquor into the crowd just because they were so happy. And I'm like, I didn't play for the Raptors, but I didn't. I did a podcast, but Danny told me, he's like, you better go ahead and let it loose. Go ahead and let them enjoy. So
yeah,
celebrations were pretty epic. I'm sure. When I talked to Danny, we probably remember it. I got so much stuff on my phone from the celebrations, out of control. It's one of the best times of my life, and I'm not even a Raptor fan.
That is awesome, man. Oh, man. So big props to you guys, man. I'm really happy for you guys. Hope you guys the best success up here in Los Angeles. Obviously, like we said, if you ever want to come back on, feel free to jump back on. You're always welcome. If anybody out there wants to follow us, which, there's a few people that follow us here and there, you can catch us at Showtime Forum. That's on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Obviously, you can listen to the podcast on every major streaming platform, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, all of that. But we appreciate everybody listening. We appreciate Harrison for jumping on today. And hopefully we got some good news, maybe some Iggy news or something popping up next week. We'll see.
All right, let's see, man. The only thing I want to see popping is more champagne on the Lakers championship parade, all right?
Oh, it's cool. But if we don't win it, you know who to blame. We know who to blame, the guy with the Midas touch.
Hey, listen, it won't be my fault. It won't be my fault.
You take 'em out next after next, regretting the best that you've lost, paying the cost. Don't forget, there's always a